feels very good because you realize that on one side the masses have accepted the film has done very well at the box office. At the same time, you realize that the jury has selected it for Panorama, which means foreign delegates. It represents India in the cinema that India has created in the last year. So I feel that it struck a very good balance between critics and the popular audience, and therefore I think it's a great achievement for me and my entire unit that our film has been given this kind of acknowledgement and respect. It feels very, very good.
Furthermore, let's remove the brands of commercial filmmaking and art cinema. As a filmmaker, how important do you think it is to be a part of an international film festival?
It's very good because you meet a lot of people, you see a lot of world cinema. It opens up an entire vision. I saw a film called Colors of Paradise yesterday by Majid Majideen. I was completely blown. I mean, I couldn't believe what I was. It was so beautiful, it was so pure, it was really great cinema. And you feel that you have so much to learn, there is so much to achieve, and you interact with so many people. And your work reaches out to people, plus their work reaches out to you. And I think that's one of the finest things about a festival. Precisely. It's basically business. I really don't know. I mean, that's not an area that I've come here for. I've come here mainly to show my work to people and to see other people's work. I think that's what it is.
Okay.
What have you come with the festival?
No, I have a documentary in the non-feature category. This is a film on the life and art of a very outstanding Kathakali actor, Kalamandalam Gopi. And that's it.
While you were speaking to Ramesh, you said you're frustrated, you haven't done something for a long time. What is this frustration because of?
Whose frustration?
Yours. You said no, you're not happy with what's going on. You said you want to do something. What is it you want to do? Why?
No, I have no frustration. Personally, I am not frustrated. No. We were talking about governmental measures to nurture, promote. No. This morning I was talking about a certain lack of understanding and appreciation of the
Let me rephrase the question for you, sir. After being in the industry for so many years, how do you see it faced now?
After?
Being in the film industry for so many years, what are your perceptions? What do you see at the moment? Where do you think it is right now? Are you happy with what you see kind of losing weight over the years by the other younger directors?
Actually, I have no reason to feel unhappy about anything. Whereas I find that many opportunities are being missed, because in other countries, say a recent emerging country in cinema at least is Iran, then there is another country that is China. So in all these cases you find a very systematic support, promotion, popularization of these art forms, particularly these films that are being made in those countries. The way Iranian films are being promoted, being supported by the government there is a lesson for us, I think. And where there are very restrictive situations, that prevail there, and they have many don'ts and many areas where they cannot tread. All the same, there is a lot of talent, and then you find them in a very strange way. You find a lot of creative impulse in action. This unfortunately, is lacking in our country. Even when the situation that prevails here is not at all conducive for a new filmmaker to come out with something absolutely new, because there is a total lack of communication between the audiences and himself, because there are no openings, there are no exhibition outlets for a new film made in this situation. So, but then all the same, films get made. When we talk about new cinema in India, from the beginning it has been a difficult task to make those films, to show them, to get them funded. All this has been a problem, but all the same, you find every year new films being made. There are so many people making their first films. This keeps on happening, it has not stopped. Whereas the press and the media has been writing obituaries of the new cinema very quickly. Now they are quick to assume that it is over, but it's not so. There are lots of films being made. There are lots of young people coming into cinema. So there are also very many people going and finding a very lucrative business in the television. That's also there. But that is a phenomenon. That's a world phenomenon.
As a senior filmmaker, how important do you think is the international film festival, especially the Indian Panorama section, vis-a-vis the young filmmaker?
No, it's a great encouragement. Actually, we have done many things for the promotion of good cinema. One is the international festival, then the Film Institute, Film Finance Corporation, now called National Film Development Corporation. We have these national awards. There are many promotional measures. It has been there, but then these devices have not been amply utilized. They have not been probably put to the best of uses. Like television, our national television is a great opening, but then look at the way the television is treating these young filmmakers. This is the problem. So where you want to sell and attractively advertisements, then you have no space or no slot for a better kind of cinema. This is what happens. So our priorities are changing. There is no real proper integrated policy towards these things. This is the problem.
Being specific about the Indian Panorama section,
Yes.
do you think, there have been similar cases like you, for example, even you've been coming for a lot of years. You don't think it's a repeat every year, same set of very senior filmmakers who are there in the Panorama?
No, there are also senior filmmakers. There are also very junior filmmakers who are making their first films. This is the best thing about Panorama. You also need veterans who have been there for years, along with the very young ones. That is how the film scene is. It is not entirely, cannot be entirely be composed of newcomers. That's not the idea of the Panorama. The idea is to showcase the best of Indian cinema in the year that has passed. I think it has been doing a lot of service in that sense, because the government is investing on making a print, subtitling it, showing it to them, to the visitors, to the selectors, festival directors. Then there is a book brought out on them. There is a lot of effort that has gone in. Probably it's not enough. Maybe we need to have more trust.
But what in your view is the basic criteria for a young as well as a senior filmmaker to be a part of the Panorama? What do you think they look for
In the Panorama?
for the Indian Panorama?
Whether you have anything new to say, whether you have a novel way of putting those things together. It's like any artistic expression. If you are repeating yourself, it's not worth watching. You have to have a novel approach, and you have to have novel things to say. It's very important. Otherwise, it can be very tiring for the filmmaker as well as the audiences. So it has to be something exciting. It has to present you with something very exciting and important.
And lastly, can we expect a full-length feature film maybe next year?
Well, I'm at the moment writing, and I hope I'll be ready with one film by next year. It is too early to discuss it and detail it at the moment, because I'm only at the writing stage now. It's too early.
As a part of the international film festival?
Well, I think it's very important. It's the only time serious Indian filmmakers can get their work displayed in front of all the delegates. So in the absence of any other forum, because they don't get into the cinema very often, unfortunately, then it's the one time they can be seen by the foreign delegates and by the Indian press and make a reputation. So I think it's incredibly important for them. And one of the things which we actually started ourselves, the foreign delegates came to Indian festivals many years ago, and we didn't see any Indian films. We just saw the international films. And so we said, well, where are the Indian films? And they said, well, they're on in town. So we said, well, why don't you put the best of the Indian films all together in a panorama section? That's how it started. And it's been very valuable because it makes a lot of reputations and it really helps people.
You've seen, over the years, you've seen the Indian industry very closely. Do you think the best of Indian cinema is actually
Well, I think more or less, sometimes there's a gap. Sometimes there's a film which I think should be in the panorama and isn't in the panorama. But generally speaking, I think you can say it is the best of the serious films being made that's shown in panorama. Of course, there's always a few controversies. Some film which isn't selected and perhaps should be. That's sometimes happened. But on the whole, I think it is the best of the Indian cinema, yes.
What about the standards? Do you think it's in there?
Well, the standard is very uneven. In the early days, there was people beginning to make their name, like Shyam Benegal and Gautam Ghosh, and Mrinal Sen was still making films. Ray was still making films. So the panorama often had 5 or 6 very good films. But unfortunately, over the last few years, it seems to me that the serious Indian filmmakers are a little bit disheartened, probably by the fact that they can never get their films into the cinemas. And if you keep on making films which don't get into the cinemas, it's one of those things which you begin to start to give up. And a lot of promising directors have just stopped making films, or are not making very good films now. People we thought were once promising. And I think that's a lack of confidence, because though there is the panorama, when they leave the panorama, there's nothing else, and that's a real tragedy. If you don't show the films, what's the point of making them? I think that's a general feeling in India now. Why do we bother to make these films at great cost? And, we spend years getting the finance and then another year to make and edit them, and they're never shown anywhere. And it's really very disheartening, especially for the regional filmmakers. And only the festivals abroad can manage to help them a little bit. And of course they can go to Western festivals, and that's something, but it doesn't make them any money. It may make them reputation, it doesn't make them any money. So it's a very great problem in India now, because there is not an art circuit. There's not a series of small cinemas dedicated to showing the work of the more serious filmmakers. Now, in most European countries there is a circuit which exists for these films, and that helps to succor them. And everybody knows that at least the critics will write about them, and they will be seen, even if only by a minority. But it's a difficult problem, and I think that's why the panorama isn't as good as it used to be.
Another controversy is the panorama section. The selectors, the faces, people say that it's the same bunch of faces, it's the same.
Well, they see. Well, if there was a panorama of British films at the London Festival, it would be very odd not to show some of the better filmmakers. And Shyam Benegal and those sort of people may not be making their best work now, but they're still as good as anybody else. And I'm afraid, if the younger filmmakers coming up were making better films, that's fair enough. But I think we need, you see, the foreign delegates are very familiar with Shyam Benegal, Aparna Sen, some of the old faces, and we want to see what their new films are like. So they should be in the panorama, but also there should be some young directors as well, and I think there often are. But the problem, the reason you're even asking that question, is because a lot of the well-known directors are not really making films as good as they used to make in the early days when they were young. And there again, it's a matter of confidence, it's a matter of lots of disappointments as far as getting their films into the cinema is concerned, and the whole depressing aspect of making movies that are not song and dance movies in India at the moment is that doesn't seem to be a market for it. And you can't go on making your films for Western critics. That's ridiculous. You know, you must make your films for your own culture, about your own culture, and for your own culture, and you hope then that the films will be appreciated. But they don't seem to be, not very widely. And you know, it's a terrible problem in all countries, because there's the commercial cinema on one side, and there's the artistic cinema on the other, and there's a great gap in the middle, where films with some commercial appeal and some artistic appeal seem to fall through that gap. And it's a real and terrible problem for independent filmmakers. Until they can show their films regularly, I don't think you'll ever get a lot of bright young people actually making them. Why should they? They might as well go into television or advertising or videos, making videos, anything but making feature films which are not shown.